Okay, hello everyone. This is part 2 in my discussion about the Sicilian C3 Echo B22. In the other game I was playing against a computer, Ripka 3, and I lost. And in this game I was playing a human opponent and I won the game. The time control was also different. It was 6 minutes. 6 minutes with 3-second increments. So let's take a look. He played e4 and the opening was the same until the move. Here, I'd say, in the previous game, I played bishop e5, but in this game, my opponent played bishop b3, which is also fine. So I continuously moving. I took the pawn on e5, and here he played d5. There are other moves as well, as always. One is knight takes e5, and another is d takes e5, and that would be, well, that would allow the queen trade on d1 and so on and so on. But instead he played the move d5. After I took here, he played d5, which is an interesting move because, well, I obviously have to move my knight. The most common move is a knight to a5, followed by knight b4, and then knight d4. Although I'm not exactly sure about the order of moves in this variation, but I believe that knight a5 is more common than the other two. But I play knight d4, which makes a lot of sense as well, because first of all I can't protect the pawn on e5 anyway, and since he played d5 I had to move my knight. So, and here I want to trade off my knight for his or the bishop on b3, so he just took my knight. I played e takes d4, queen takes d4, e6, and this is, as far as I know, still opening theory. Here we castle, but I believe that the book move would have been knight c3, just protecting the pawn on d5 once more. But he castled away, which is, I suppose, okay, because after knight takes d5, he can still win back the pawn at some, well, basically any time. I'll play queen b6. Well, if you look at the pawn on g7 here, it's rather weak, and I can't actually move my bishop anywhere. For example, with bishop e7, then he can just take on g7, and so on and so forth. So it's very hard to actually, in this particular variation, to develop the king side completely, as long as his queen is on either e5 or where he stands now on d4. So I play queen b6, hoping that he trade, which he did not. He played bishop a4 check. I played bishop d7, more or less the only move. Took, bishop takes d7 check, king d7, and now queen a4. Now, first of all, I have to say that I haven't analyzed these games. I did not analyze the game against a computer, and so every game that I show is more or less the way they were played, and sometimes I think that's actually a better thing to do than to sit around analyzing a bunch of moves instead of just discussing the moves that were actually played on the board. So he played queen a4 check, and obviously I want to trade queen, so I played queen c6. He did not. Queen b3, bishop d6, and now my knight is no longer pinned, but on the other hand my bishop is, so when the knight moves it's exactly the same situation, except that the pieces basically just trade place. So we play knight c3, I play knight takes c3, b takes c3, obviously avoiding to trade queens, and that's actually a pretty interesting, or important rather, principle to keep in mind, that if you have an attack going on, you obviously don't want to trade off the strongest piece. But of course that varies in every game. It's like every rule of thumb has an exception, and that is very true in chess. But obviously here the trading off queens makes no sense for white. Bishop a3, and now rook takes d6. Might look at a first glance that white is actually giving up a rook to the exchange, but of course it's not, because his bishop is on a3, and after a take back it's just pinning my rook, and after rook d1 I simply can't do anything else but play rook 8 d8. And now just a bunch of trades, and here in the endgame I'm actually up a pawn, and he has two isolated pawns on the queen side. I have two connected pawns on the queen side, and at a first glance it might look like I have a winning game, but it's far from that easy. Because again, the queens are still on the board, and as we will see, I'm absolutely sure that he could have drawn this game very easily. b5, g3, just opening up for the king in case of any back rank checks. a5, queen d1, queen d5, queen e2, just a move. g6, I couldn't find much anything. And maybe there were other moves, but like I said, I haven't analyzed neither of these games. And it was still both were blitz games. I played g6, queen e3, and now he's threatening to play queen b6 and queen a7. I could only stop one, of course. It's queen c6. And now he has a double threat. He can take on either a5 and on f7. So I just played queen takes a2, protect my a5 pawn by giving up the f7 pawn. And here I'll play queen a1 check, king g2, queen takes e3. Of course, you might speculate if, for example, I could play something else instead. Perhaps kept my queen where it is and protect my pawn here, and then just try to push these pawns or something. That's very possible, but you know, in a blitz game it's very difficult to see or actually sit down and calculate all those kind of moves. So as we can see now in this next move, until his final mistake, well, his only mistake more or less, it's very difficult to get away from all these checks. And here we can even win the pawn on a5, but he did not want that to happen. And again, it's getting away from all these checks is more or less impossible. So I believe that after, for example, queen takes a5, okay, I still have a passed pawn on the queen side, and his king is on g2. It's very difficult to check, you know, or anything like that. He can just move back and forth. So after queen a5, the game is virtually drawn. I'd say that it's actually drawn right here. I mean, it's very difficult to, like I said, get away from all these checks. But you know, he was hoping for some sort of mistake, and that was his mistake. So now after queen e7 check, king d4, and here the final mistake: queen d7 check, queen d5 check, forcing a queen trade. And of course, after the queen trades, after the queen come off the board, I have two passed pawns on the queen side, so it's completely wrong for black. Well, we can see that mistakes like this usually happen in blitz games, and that's probably why I didn't actually, you know, like offer a draw. He did not actually offer me a draw, but I mean, if he had, I probably would have considered that. But here, you know, in blitz games anything can happen, and of course not only in blitz games, but you know, at all time controls. But so here, queen d5 check, just forcing a queen trade. Obviously, he could have checked over here, he could have checked over there, you know, and here, you know, anywhere. But he chose the wrong square, and he resigned. So let's take a very quick look at the opening one more time in 4, and the opening was almost the same, except that my opponent played bishop e3, I took, and then he played d5. And I mentioned that black can play knight to a5, b4, and d4, which I played. I believe that those are the most, yeah, right, those are the moves. I chose d4, and it's a matter of taste. I didn't actually know this opening that well, so I thought that knight d4 made a lot of sense, because again, there's no way to hold on to this pawn over here on e5. So, and it was all opening theory until I made e6, and then in castle. That was the last book move. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon.